Jesse, welcome back in. We had exchanged some nice pleasantries here. It's always good to see your lovely face. I've just recently seen a lot of Josh's. It's a pretty stupid face, right? I mean, you're a good-looking guy, but
yeah, strikingly handsome. That wasn't what you said last night, Dan.
Josh and I spent 24 hours. I feel like a lot of times when we record this, we've just worked together, which is actually
it's
a rarity.
Been happening more and more. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were going to talk a little, just joke about this training. We were at this 4-hour-long RIT training, which is Rapid Intervention Team, which is the guys who save the guys who are saving people, right? We're basically training to be the SEAL Team 6 of the fire service, which I feel like we can put ourselves in the same category as those operators, I'd say. What do you say, Dan?
Yeah, maybe a slight tier below. I'd in terms of intelligence, acumen, and just stature, I'd put myself up there with a Navy SEAL.
And
damn
service.
Close.
Yeah, you're probably about as tall. Yeah.
Yeah. We actually have a guy who was in Buds and tried to make it as a Navy SEAL. He's probably listening because I think he listens every week, so I want to be a little careful. But when he started, Josh, I think I remember talking a little bit of shit about him with you because everybody at the department was talking. He was sharing that I almost was a Navy SEAL. It's like you were almost bragging about almost being something is a little odd. Like, how close were you?
Especially when
I don't know.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, which part did he tap out on? Was it the log? Was it the log on your chest where you had to do crunches, or was it getting sand up your ass for 6 days straight?
I don't know.
I
don't know how far in he made it
for sure.
Yeah.
So did he say that firefighter training is harder than Navy SEAL training?
Yeah. I think he described it as just tyranny versus like Buds training. Straight up tyranny.
Walk in the park doing Buds training, huh?
I will say I'm actually going to draw a RIT self-custody analogy here, Josh.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, wow. This is coming off the cuff, so be careful.
Yeah, it's coming off the cuff. So this training yesterday was actually pretty good. A neighboring department got access to a house that they're going to tear down. And we can't, sometimes you burn houses and you do training in them. We can't do that because it's right next to a school and a grocery store. But they had these 4 stations, and basically, to clarify, rapid intervention is when we have a down member, when a firefighter's in trouble, calls a mayday, and you have to go get him or her. And Josh and I made this observation when the training ended, which is like, when the shit hits the fan and you're actually asked to do this type of stuff, which we may never do in our career. I've never executed a firefighter rescue yet. Josh, you haven't either, correct?
No.
So
actually, in the fire academy, I did. A girl passed out. It was my first grab in the fire academy.
Wow, dude!
I felt pretty good about it. Yeah,
hero. The point I'm making here is when you're hot and sweaty, you're wearing 70 pounds on your back, you have an SCBA on your face. Things that sound like they're gonna work. Oh, we're just gonna pull the guy up through the floor. Just gonna tie a handcuff knot and pull him up through that hole in the floor. Things that sound simple and that you can conceptualize in your head, they don't work. And so a lot of firefighter training is getting back to the bare bones basics. What is going to be workable in an environment when it's high heat, low visibility, and you're the most amped up you've ever been in your life, right? And so it's practical praxis of how this is going to work. They did a pretty good job of this at the training the other day, and in a way, it's kind of like self-custody. I know it's a little bit of a stretch, but we're going to talk some about this today. Things that sound sexy and workable. Oh, just going to set up a multi-sig on Sparrow, no big deal. When push comes to shove and the shit hits the fan 15 years from now, how workable is it going to be? And Jesse, you have been up to some mischief in terms of simplifying this for high stakes individuals with a lot of Bitcoin. But yeah, that was off the cuff. That was not pre-planned, but yeah.
What a segue, connecting firefighting and self-custody and Bitcoin custody in general.
I'm proud of myself, Josh.
Yeah, you should be. Yeah, I'm proud of you too.
Jesse, explain what you've been up to, though. Give a little background to what I just introed there.
Of course, yeah. So for the last pushing 2 years now, been working on a Bitcoin company, a Bitcoin-only company, focused on self-custody, a version of custody. And it's slightly different from self-custody. It's multi-institution, multi-sig Bitcoin custody. And so that's a mouthful. And your audience is probably familiar with multi-sig custody.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's kind of best practice, right? Not your keys, not your coins. That's been the mantra for the last 10 years because you've had two options. You've had two options with your Bitcoin custody for, the entire 15 years. It's either been take care of it yourself or trust somebody else with it, right? And that's it. So you either set up your own self-custody, your own multi-sig, or maybe it's a single sig hardware wallet, or maybe it's pieces of paper, and you put it under your mattress. That's one side of things. The other side is trust your coins to Coinbase. Hope that they're there. Trust your coins to FTX. Hope that they're there. Trust your coins to Prime Trust. Hope that they're there, or Fortress Trust, or whatever.
Celsius, BlockFi, any of these clowns.
Exactly. Very long list of broken trust scenarios. That's been your options. But because of multi-sig, there's an exciting new era that we're just entering now. Bitcoin's native multi-sig properties makes it possible for a single wallet to be controlled by multiple keys. People are familiar with this with Unchained or Casa. Collaborative custody is a form of multi-sig. But fundamentally, those versions require the client, the end user, to participate and to maintain control, have a quorum, have the majority of keys. And that's what we're familiar with. So multi-sig in that sort of format. What we've done now at Onramp is we're kind of the trailblazers of multi-institution multi-sig custody, where the end user, the individual, the client, doesn't actually hold a key. And so that's a bit of a radical statement when we've had the last decade of not your keys, not your coins. Here's multi-institution custody where the end user doesn't hold a key. Instead, 3 different institutions hold the 3 different keys in a multi-sig setup, a simple 2 of 3, on behalf of the end user. So in this way, the end user onboards with each of these institutions, these 3 institutions, all coordinated by whoever's managing this overall setup. In our case, that's us, Onramp. So we have our partners are BitGo and CoinCover. BitGo is the kind of the name that people, most retail Bitcoin hodlers and sat stackers probably aren't aware of, but they run a lot of the infrastructure, the back end for much of the industry. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. They have close to $100 billion of crypto assets that they provide custody for. The guy who started BitGo invented multi-sig.
NBD.
Yeah, exactly. And frankly, when they heard about what we were doing, they got excited and they wanted to participate in this new era, this new iteration of multi-sig. So that's one of our key partners. And then CoinCover, who's kind of the leading backup partner for BitGo. They do this day in, day out. They're based in the UK, and this is their entire business that they've been building with BitGo, is providing like a recovery key services and insurance. So 2 of the 2 best partners we could possibly have for this sort of pioneering product, a new version of multi-sig. So that's what we have: multi-institution, multi-sig custody, where when you onboard with Onramp, you are onboarding with us, and then we hold a key on your behalf. You also are onboarding with BitGo and with CoinCover, and they hold a key on your behalf. And the key part, the important part here, is that for any transaction to occur, none of those 3 key holding institutions can do that unilaterally. They only have 1/3 of the cryptographic material. and they're not authorized to sign any transaction except at the direction of the end user. So you have to go through the authentication and verification processes for each of these three institutions before anything is signed on your behalf.
So, I have a couple, just a quick couple questions about how this works. No, so you said you have to be verified by each independent key holder. So they each have their own verification process. And then when you want to spend out of this vault, you have to go through a verification for each one of those keys, right? So Onramp has one. You said BitGo, and was it
CoinCover? Yes.
CoinCover. Okay. The thing I think some people might be concerned about, just thinking about into the near future, is how good AI is becoming at faking video.
Sure.
So what does the verification look like? Because I don't know. I mean, besides cryptographic keys and PGP being kind of unfakeable for AI as far as we can tell for quite a long period of time, how exactly is that verification done with each one of these guys?
Yeah, it's a great point. It's an area where change will be coming, I think, to the overall industry. For now, the largest players, the most reputable players, still do include video verification as part of it, and I think that will continue to be the case. It's a part of the authentication process, but not like the whole thing.
Yeah.
So for Onramp, for example, our basic version is you have to be able to log in to your account. So you have to have your credentials and your password and 2FA. So that's that right there takes care of a big risk vector.
Right.
And that's just to initiate a transaction, right? And so then once you've initiated the transaction, then you have to go through the video verification process where you have to have a conversation with your Onramp client services rep about what this transaction is, like where are you sending it to, how much. You have to know those details. And then that's just for Onramp. That's just for 1/3 of the keys to sign. BitGo has their whole process. CoinCover has their whole process. It's worth noting that like the BitGo authentication steps are, what any large scale BitGo customer has to go through to move any funds. For that matter, the key that's involved happens to be the same. BitGo is providing the custody for the Valkyrie ETF through the same format, right. And that's 1/3 of the security in our arrangement. Is 1/3 of the security is sufficient to secure an entire ETF. So it's actually kind of overkill, really. And
right, you think about the honeypots that are available, like your piddly amount of Bitcoin compared to what these ETFs are holding is not even comparable.
Right. That's a great point. And people when they first hear about this, they like to get into like, okay, well, how can it possibly be circumvented or broken or whatever? Like, what are the possible risks there? And I think, of course, that's where our heads go, but it's important to think about this is relative to other things too.
Right.
No custody solution is 100% perfect.
For sure.
There's 99.999%, and then you're hoping to add a few more nines, right? And I think that the important thing to bear in mind here is self-custody has risks. Third-party custody has risks. It's very obvious with third-party custody what those risks are, because we have this 10, 15-year track record of when it goes wrong, Mt. Gox and everything else. So there's also, like, if your credentials get hacked to Coinbase, and this happens every day, people get SIM swapped and their coins are withdrawn. And sorry, like that isn't Coinbase having a problem. That's you having a problem.
Yeah,
like you're shit out of luck.
Yeah.
On the other side of things, there's self-custody where, you can have perfect security because you set it up with open source software and you do it right. But there's actually kind of two hidden risks that pop up there. Is One is the wrench attack. Like, can an attacker demand that you send all your coins to an address they control, on pain of death? I think most self-custody setups don't fully solve that. Maybe they partly solve that. The other big thing is that the more complicated your self-custody gets, the more secure it gets, the greater the likelihood that if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, your family won't know what to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that's like another hidden risk with self-custody. So no custody solution is perfect, but we can make things better and better by having mitigating counterparty risk, which multi-institution custody does, and also solving for some of the self-custody problems of user error. How about shifting some of that responsibility and expertise to companies that do this as on a daily basis and have for 10 years, and so on. So it's about risk mitigation ultimately, and I think I think the multi-institution custody is actually quite a landmark first, because for all of human history, for all of Bitcoin history, certainly, we've had these two options: self-custody and third-party custody. And because of the properties of Bitcoin, it's possible to have a third type of custody, where it's multi-party custody, where no single party has sufficient control to enact a transaction. That's not possible with gold or cash or anything like that. Like whoever has it, and it's only possible with Bitcoin. And so I think that's going to be a part of the story of Bitcoin becoming a better store of value asset than gold or anything else, because it's possible to have this like trust minimized version of custody relative to physical assets.
Wow.
Bitcoin 2024 is moving to the heart of Bitcoin country, Nashville. Nashville just feels like the proper place for a Bitcoin conference. I can't guarantee we will be on main stage, or side stage, or even performing a puppet show. I can, however, say that we will be hanging out with the plebes, and if we have no obligations, we will very likely be getting drunk. Bitcoin Magazine is introducing a new event this spring, Bitcoin Asia. It's shaping up to be an unmissable experience. Stay tuned for more info. Whether you want to visit Bitcoin Asia or Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, we have a coupon code for you. Use coupon code BCB for 10% off any ticket to either event. That's code BCB.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big idea. That's a big idea to dwell on for a second. With a digital cryptographic money, there are new options for custody, and they're a big, big deal. That's a powerful idea. A couple other observations I wanted to toss in is that I'm constantly attuned to the thoughts of skeptics listening. And there's probably a person or two that's already 17 minutes into this episode thinking, what the fuck? Like, why would I trust these other, players to distribute this? It sounds complicated. Josh brought up this AI risk of being faked. Why wouldn't I? I hear that. Couple follow-ups to that skepticism. The first is that in this space, there's a lot of naivety, and a lot of folks are coming at this from a perspective where, and this is us too, where they don't have tremendous assets, or maybe for the first time they have significant assets, but there's no super, super wealthy person with enormous net worth that hears about your product and goes, that doesn't make any sense. The only people that this product doesn't make sense to are people that are either naive or don't have a ton of assets. Because I fucking promise you that if you're worth $17 million, you're not interested in having full ownership of all of that net worth. You want some of it distributed. You want experts to take custody of some of your assets when you've amassed that much wealth. And this kind of moves into my next point of if you have a ton of Bitcoin, parking it in multiple destinations is a great idea. Maybe some of that's in self-custody. Maybe some of that's in a collaborative custody multi-sig setup. Maybe some of that's in your multi-institutional setup. But people are going to want different options to distribute the risk, even for Bitcoin that they have full ownership over. And so I'll end this comment by just touching on we are huge fans of self-custody as you are, Jesse, but we're also keenly aware that risks do exist. And I sometimes laugh when we just keep harping on the trope, not your keys, not your coins. I'm going to repeat that back to each of us. Not your keys, not your coins, right? That same trope can fuck you or your spouse in the future. And as time wears on, by far, the biggest risk of self-custody is proving tangibly to be the holders of the keys. Like it's not someone coming in with the wrench. It's you getting out over your skis and not being able to get down the slope. And it's a healthy reminder to all of us, kind of back to the initial point of simpler is better. And when in doubt, go with the more simple option, because man, as the years pile up, the complexity is going to muddy the waters more than most of us realize.
I also think that this problem takes care of itself for a lot of people, because we've been in that boat. You buy, say you had a half of a Bitcoin in 2017 or whenever you decided to start dipping your toe in the water here. You watch this thing grow for 6 to 7 years, and pretty soon it's an amount of wealth that you may not have expected to acquire. And you start to think like, holy shit, the responsibility is growing along with the price of this thing. And how much responsibility do I want to shoulder versus how much do I want to offload? And that's a personal question for every single person. I think myself, I'm probably going to do something along the lines of splitting some things up into different baskets. And I think that's probably the way a lot of people will end up going, because most people don't want to be sitting on, I don't know, just make up a crazy number, $10 million and hiding it in their backyard. Like that's not a very good calculation in my mind.
Yeah. And just protection from yourself too. We're going back to basics here, but your self-custody setup needs to be dementia proof.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think
Biden's
people think about that
keys,
enough.
I can tell you that.
Yeah. You need to have the humility to realize that your brain and your understanding of your setup could go today in a car accident or 38 years from now when you get Alzheimer's.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I think that speaks to the risk of self-custody that we don't acknowledge enough. And yeah, to some of what you guys were saying, like I use self-custody. I also use Onramp's multi-institution custody. I have 2 baskets. I used to have 1 basket, and it made me very uncomfortable. And that's part of why we made this product.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the space are starting to feel that discomfort. Like maybe it's just starting to inkle in, it's tingling now, but when this thing doubles in price or triples in price from here, you're going to have some decisions to make. And like Dan said earlier, like there's not many millionaires, multimillionaires, and especially not billionaires that are sitting on gold vaults in their mansion. Like that's fucking crazy.
For sure. Right. Like if you're afraid of heights, your butthole puckers the higher you get. Right. And so as number goes up, that's when your butthole's going to pucker. You're not going to care when you have $3,800 on a cold card in your basement. That'll be a bummer. When that becomes 380
examples do we have personally? When we know a guy who vacuumed up a paper wallet in 2017 that was worth $1,300 then. I mean, what is that fucking thing worth right now? Like $7 or $8 grand at least?
I saw a tweet the other day of, I follow this Coinfessions thing where people supposedly post anonymous like confessions about crypto stuff. But they said that they had 40 Bitcoin on a hardware wallet and then they had a house fire and it's gone.
Oh, fuck.
And like, you're not thinking about that risk, but like that's possible.
100% it's possible. And it's kind of funny in our job. It's like in some senses we're like, oh man, we never go on fires. But then in the town we work in, which is a town of about 45,000 people, Josh, if Josh and I got you in a car, Jesse, and drove you around just this municipality and said, that house caught on fire, that house caught on fire. Like there's a lot of homes in this one subdivision that have burned even in the 11 or 12 years Josh has been here. And in the 8, so it's like, this shit happens, dude. Basement could flood. Your house could catch on fire.
Yeah, your kid might be an arsonist,
Right.
Your kid might find out you got Bitcoin and take that fucker to school. And who knows?
Yeah. And then there are these other funny examples too of like, the guy who has put his Bitcoin on an iron key, which is like a special kind of USB drive that after I think it's 10 failed passwords, it wipes itself, and he can't remember his password, and he's down to one more
I heard
guess.
about that guy.
Well, like, Josh, think about the fact remember the device you made obsolete? Like, you didn't have much Bitcoin on it, but
yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many hardware wallets I've destroyed by forgetting PIN numbers. I have so many, I have a shitload of them. I have so many decoys in my house, you'd never figure out which one it is. But I think it was, we bought it at a conference a couple years ago. I took it home. I put a PIN number on it that I was sure I wouldn't forget. Well, guess what? That thing's a fucking brick now. Yeah. I forgot it. But luckily there was nothing on it.
Some of this too, because I don't want to freak people out too much, but some of this is, you got to be in. I really feel like I'm getting more and more comfortable saying that once you're established, you got to work towards some kind of multi-sig.
Yes.
Whether that's a collaborative custody, whether that's an on-ramp situation, whether that's you feel comfortable setting up your own situation and you have an inheritance plan for that. But to me, the longer I've been in this space, the more I've been in multi-sig setups, the more I'm like, it's just crazy to have a single sig device with a ton of Bitcoin on it. For me, at least, that's the situation that makes me very uncomfortable. Personally.
Yeah, I think over the last 5 years, maybe 6 or 7 years, the shift from single sig to multi-sig has been great. It's been important. And I think that's still a part of the equation here. Like, I think that multi-institution custody now means that we're in an era of splitting. I think the best practice going forward is if you can split your custody into a multi-sig self-custody and then also a multi-institution custody, because there's some advantages to the multi-institution custody that may not exist with the multi-sig. For example, like a wrench attack still possible with multi-sig, much harder with multi-institution custody because of two things. Because you have to get through the authentication process with multiple key holders who, if they, it's part of the contract, like if you're under duress, they will pause. They will hold off on signing a transaction if they believe you're under duress. And the other part of it is it takes some time. So like a wrench attack, like that can be executed in an afternoon, a day, 2 days. I don't really know. Like, I guess typically the stories we hear are like, it's a smash and grab kind of thing where it happens pretty quickly. But with multi-institution custody, you have to go through several days of steps with multiple institutions. So it slows things down. It makes a wrench attack much harder. So, there's some benefits there. And then the other part of it is that inheritance is sort of built in to a multi-institution setup, because it's ultimately a legal arrangement that you have with this self-custody, this custody solution and the participating institutions, where if you can, as part of Onramp's product, we have a Onramp heritage where it's just you can designate who your beneficiaries are and what you want to have happen. And then in the event that you die and there's a death certificate, then we know exactly what to do and who to reach out to and who to onboard to now be the client that we're interfacing with. The custody doesn't have to change at all. And now just the legal relationship shifts from you to now your beneficiaries without any risk in that transition. So some advantages to the two different formats. And I think that, going from a world where everybody has not your keys, not your coins in one basket, to a world where you have multiple baskets, 2 baskets, one with self-custody multi-sig and the other with multi-institution custody. And the key with both of them is that you, as the end user, retain control. That's what's not true of third-party custody. Coinbase, FTX, Mt. Gox, they have your coins,
right?
If you trust them with them. But with multi-institution custody, you still retain control. It's still your setup. You just have participating key holders who do not have unilateral control of your coins.
Yeah. Wait, one comment before we get off. I was just going to make the clarification. I'm not sure where your product line's going, but you have to have a lot of Bitcoin.
Yeah,
you guys have a $500,000 entry point. So for anybody that's getting overly excited, let's go back to basics and say maybe that's a collab with Swan or Unchained or Casa or whatever. Your product is more geared towards HNWI individuals for sure.
That's right. And that's where, a new product like this has to start. I think over time, I was telling you guys before, I think that over time, this becomes the default for how Bitcoin custody is done. And we're talking the next couple of decades. I think the advantages of it over self-custody, over unilateral control custody are quite clear, quite resounding. And then I think that eventually 80% of capital in Bitcoin ends up in or at least using partially a multi-institution custody format. And again, I think that having multiple baskets is part of that. So not 80% of capital, but 80% of people, I think, will end up using that as part of how they're custodying their coins.
And when you deposit here, you'd get the XPubs so you can view the wallet, correct? So people can just verify like, oh yeah, the money that I put in there is there.
Yeah. So it's a multi-sig, and it's all on chain, and you get the XPubs, and you can see it. There is some trickiness with the derivation paths with this sort of format that makes it so it's kind of hard to run it through like a Sparrow, but it's all on chain. So you get your address that you can go view on mempool or Blockstream and know that it's all there, as well as obviously viewing it through your login with Onramp. And so it is a product that it makes sense. The economics of it makes sense. Around $500,000 of Bitcoin end up from the client point of view. We do have a product. We have a Bitcoin investment fund. It's the same idea, just doesn't, rather than separately managed accounts, it's a pooled investment vehicle, and the minimum there is 100,000. So, but if you already have your coins you already have self custody, it probably doesn't make as much sense to go backwards into an investment fund. That investment fund is frankly the best solution versus like the ETFs in particular, for if you have relatives or coworkers who are ready to deploy $100,000 into Bitcoin and they don't want to set up self-custody. This actually is a great solution for them to do that and be able to withdraw to self-custody in the future without a taxable event. And that's different from the ETFs, because the ETFs are cash creates and redeems. So you have to withdraw in cash. And once you do that, that's a taxable event. You have to pay your taxes before you can buy coins to then self-custody. So the ETFs have that major pitfall. Our private placement Bitcoin trust that uses our multi-institution custody format doesn't have that problem. So FYI, if you have folks in your life that might fit that bill, reach out to us.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's good to know.
What is up, folks? It's Dan here, and I'm going to take just a quick moment to talk to you about where Josh and I buy our Bitcoin, and that is at Swan Bitcoin. The two of us have now been dollar cost averaging on Swan for years, and here's why. It's user-friendly. The fees are low and transparent. Withdrawals are absolutely free. They offer attentive expert service, and Swan has a full suite of financial services, including an IRA product where you can roll a traditional or a Roth IRA into Bitcoin, Swan Private for high net worth individuals, and coming soon, Swan Vault for collaborative custody. In our view, Swan just gets it. They're focused on Bitcoin only. They provide really solid and ongoing education, and they strongly encourage self-custody. Maybe most importantly, it's low friction. Setting up and accessing a Swan account is so easy that it's Boomer and Firefighter proof. Keep that stack thick. That's THIC, no K at the end, at swan.com.
I think we should get an update on when we first talked to you. We talked a lot about your Yuppie friends because you wrote the article about how they have such a hard time grokking Bitcoin. Just curious what the update is with them at this point, because the ETF approval, a lot of people in the traditional finance world have maybe been a little more enlightened, having seen that happen. Has that moved the needle at all?
Give us a Yup-date, please.
Yup-date.
It's funny that it's been pretty quiet. Like, I think, so obviously the ETFs and BlackRock's endorsement of Bitcoin as an asset class has been massive, unquestionable. That has legitimized this thing in the eyes of yuppies broadly, in a way that it has never been before. I mean, and we're seeing that with the boomer 401ks are flowing in, right? Like people who have wealth and have it, have BlackRock as their asset manager are now having little bits of their wealth pointed into their ETF, and that is good for Bitcoin. It may not be the best vehicle, but it's good for Bitcoin, and it's a good way to start your exposure to Bitcoin. And importantly, to flip the minds of all these yuppies or boomers from Bitcoin bad to Bitcoin good. I want Bitcoin to go up. I want to protect Bitcoin. I'm team Bitcoin, and that's huge. But in terms of my personal network, silence for the most part.
Interesting.
And I think that's human nature.
Yeah.
That's inevitable. That like I was the crazy guy saying, wait, I think everything we learned at business school was wrong. I think this Bitcoin thing might be the way to go. And, many of my friends are like VCs and, or they work in private equity or even hedge funds. I had an interaction with one guy who works at I guess it's a hedge fund, in like, 2019, where he was just mocking Bitcoin and my interest in Bitcoin. Haven't heard from him in a while. And, that was a slightly antagonistic relationship from business school. But my friends, they're kind of in two groups of like, I either managed to get them to hold a couple coins and they're like happy, but like it's a little bittersweet because dang it, Jesse was right and I should have gotten more, but at least I have some, so
right.
There's that group. And then there's the group that like, I tried and I failed to get them to buy any, and it's total silence from them. And that's just how it is.
Well, it's time to start rubbing it in their faces, Jesse.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that most of us are largely unaware of the timeline and magnitude of our changes in perspective. I am thinking of a recent example. Josh is aware of this. When we first met, my views on, say, Christianity have changed really dramatically over the last 10 years, just to pick an example from my life. And I'm kind of unaware of that timeline. Like I'm made aware of that timeline when people remind me, Dan, you in this time span, you said this, whatever. 8 years ago, I remember you saying this, or 4 years ago, you said this. People often deceive themselves into thinking that they've had viewpoints much longer than they've had them. So the point I'm making here with you and your yuppie friends from business school is that you're thinking about their position on Bitcoin the last time you talked to them.
Great point.
Or it was that party 4 years ago, and their perspective then is on your mind. That's not what they're thinking about, because this is like cultural osmosis that's happening sort of slowly, right? And as Bitcoin gains public consciousness, people don't realize that their perspectives are moving really dramatically, especially their poor dispositions to it, or people calling it completely fake and scammy. They would kind of be taken aback to realize, oh shit, I was saying that like 4 years ago. And so some of it's that, seriously, to let people off the hook, texting Jesse or texting Josh or Dan being like, dude, you were right about Bitcoin. It's not that they're choosing not to do that. They're just they've forgotten about their interaction with you. They think their perspective on Bitcoin has been at this point that they're at of maybe interest for a lot longer than it has. I don't know if that resonates with you two guys, but I think that plays into it some.
I think the idea of gradually then suddenly also applies to ideas. Like you read a book and it moves the needle a little bit, and then you read something else tangentially related to whatever that was. And it's these touch points over a period of time. And then suddenly whatever it is, what bit of media, what book, it clicks. And then it's that suddenly moment. And I felt that way through a lot of idea spaces throughout my life. And I think that's a pretty common occurrence for a lot of people. Yeah. All of this stuff, these little touch points, they add up to that exponential curve of understanding.
Yeah. I have an example of it that speaks to what Dan was saying so one of my business school friends was a banker at First Republic. And I remember at a party not long after business school, so like 2017 or 2018, like sort of poking about like what does the bank think about Bitcoin? Like what do you like? You're gonna get blindsided, like sort of needling. And she could just kind of brush it off, was a little dismissive. And then fast forward a few years, and she ends up joining River because something between that interaction and a few years later, she, as she describes herself, as now an enlightened banker, and I think has changed her mind. Sorry, Julia, sorry to call you out here. She made the journey as a banker, MBA banker. She made the journey to Bitcoin and joined a Bitcoin company, which is awesome. And I think that speaks to it. Everybody's on their own journey, and nobody's putting out updates about where they're at.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. It's and there's examples where we're all on that same journey too, and a lot of us feign a degree of confidence or certainty in something that's a fairly new arrival, and we pretend like it's been that way our entire adult life or something like that. So, I mean, the word grace just continually comes to mind as we enter bull runs. It's you joined in a similar environment to this one. 90% of people listening, you got interested in Bitcoin in a previous cycle at about this time or after. Yep. You were the new arrival.
That's absolutely true.
And people received you with open arms. Nobody expected. Hopefully, there's no way that people coming in are going to understand all the intricacies of this subculture and everything about how Bitcoin works, and realize Bitcoin's bigger than yourself, and let people make their own journey. Don't make that journey for them. I really liked your recent. Well, it was December. You've kind of stopped writing these things as the business has taken off. But your piece from December about how best to describe Bitcoin, and I just want to pick your brain on it a little bit because I really enjoyed this piece. You talked some about just how hard it is to explain this thing, and you talked about the old elephant analogy of everybody's touching one part of the elephant. Nobody can really fully get a big picture of it, and any Bitcoiner listening has been overwhelmed at some certain point trying to introduce this to someone. Take that wherever you want it. What was the motivation behind this piece? And from what you remember of writing it, what were some of your major takeaways of trying to intro this to people that are new? Because there's a lot of them. They're coming right now, and they're going to keep coming if this cycle keeps playing out. Yeah,
I guess it's an idea that people have talked about in Bitcoin before. And so I encountered it from a few different perspectives before of like, Bitcoin is hard to describe because it's like describing an elephant, and that metaphor has been around. But I hadn't seen it like crystallized into an article and any graphics to show that, that happening. So I wanted to do that. And and I think we all face the problem I think we confuse people who are trying to learn about Bitcoin, pre-coiners who are not yet deep enough down the rabbit hole to understand that Bitcoin is multiple things, and they're looking for an answer. Like, what is Bitcoin?
Yeah,
I just want to know what Bitcoin is. People keep telling me different stuff. Like, what the hell is it? Is it a digital ledger? Is it a wall of encrypted energy? What are we talking about?
Is it a slippery hog? What is it? Right. You know what I mean?
Is it a slippery hog of financial freedom? What are we dealing with? And so, the reality is that we talk about Bitcoin based on whatever we're thinking about at that moment, and we're excited about, like, hey, this thing, it's going to be the buyer of last resort for stranded or unused energy. Like, that's amazing. And that is true, but that's a piece of it. And if we're really going to describe Bitcoin, there's sort of a hierarchy in my mind of like there are all these things that Bitcoin is. It is a buyer of last resort of energy. But that it's not helpful if we lead with that. Like, that buries the lead of what it really is. Bitcoin is digital gold at the end of the day. Like, digital gold that gets more valuable over time. It is a savings technology. Like, those are the things that the level of conversation that we should lead with when we're introducing Bitcoin.
Yeah, and it's absolutely from the lens of the person entering, Like, if you listen to Greg Foss, he compares everything to the fixed income market because he was a fixed income market guy. If you listen to Preston, he compares it through a lens of value investing. If you listen to I can't think of his name.
Couple firemen, we talk about barn animals.
Yeah, barn. Yeah. Who was the hedge fund guy or billionaire who was calling it the fastest horse? I can't remember. Was it Druckenmiller?
Paul Tudor Jones said Tudor Jones. Fastest horse. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's all these different ways to describe this, and they're all talking about the same thing from a different perspective.
Yep.
And that's exactly, the point crystallized by the elephant analogy.
Yeah, that's right. And it is all these things. The tail is the fastest horse. Let's say, I don't know, whatever piece of the elephant is each of these different, fixed income market or whatever analogy you want to make. But like, the big picture that I wish the whole world just heard this line, because I think that's the right starting point. Is like, Bitcoin is digital gold. That's enough. Like, that's what.
Yeah, that creeps the door open
to. And then if you're going to add anything more to it, Bitcoin is digital gold, and it gets more valuable over time. Like, just because that becomes a mystery that you want to inquire more. Like, how is that possible? It's not possible. Turns out through increasing scarcity, that is possible. That's what we've been seeing through the last 15 years, and we know through the halving schedule that will continue. So increasing scarcity causes this thing to appreciate in value. It's digital gold that grows in value. Therefore, it's a savings technology in a way that gold is a store of value, but this is a store of value plus a grow your value technology. It's a savings technology ultimately that's better than any other savings technology out there. That's like, in my mind, that's the right way to communicate most effectively what Bitcoin can mean to the person on the other side, because everybody's interested in a savings technology that grows their value. Not everybody's interested in a buyer of last resort for unused energy. If you're talking to an oil guy who's flaring gas on his property, like, that might be the thing you lead with. But on the whole, people are interested in digital gold that gets more valuable.
Yeah. Another part of your piece that piggybacks on this a little bit is that you talk about how transformative innovations sound kind of boring.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
and this is where you sounded dumb to your yuppie friends, probably. Like, and it's understandable. Dude, it's digital gold. It's going to change everything. Like, in your piece, you had a link to the Bill Gates on Letterman. And listening back to it, we've all heard this, him talking about the internet. He sounds fucking stupid. Yeah. I mean, he really does. Like, if you think about it through the lens back, then he's saying the internet is a place where people are publishing their information. It's going to change the world. Folks are sitting there in the 90s going, okay,
what is it?
Like,
what does that mean?
Yeah. And so this is one of the difficulties of explaining something that's sort of this simple and this complex at the same time, is that it sounds boring. It almost dupes people into thinking that they get it and then dismiss it, right? Because it sounds so simple. They're like, oh, if that's what Bitcoin is, okay, I'll keep an eye on it. And you're sitting there going, dude, no, it's such a fucking big deal, but it's such a simple thing. And that's just something we all have to make peace with, that friction, because there's no way to solve that problem in a dinner party. You have to get your purchase point somewhere. You have to get that tool in the door and then start trying to spread it, because there's no way to just bust it down completely.
You guys were talking to Mark Moss on your podcast, Scarce Assets, and he talked about how in the early 2000s, he was trying to sell, I think he said motocross parts online. He created like a whole online store, had to set up his own servers, and he couldn't get the companies that produce the parts to let him sell them because they couldn't see the bigger picture. They couldn't understand that people would be wanting to buy these things online. They just were stuck in that traditional retail, storefront idea. But he saw it, right? And he described that as very similar to what he sees today in the last few years. Like, people are presented with this big idea that they just can't, and I'm not saying I can or any of us can really understand or grok what this thing will be in 15 years, but it's going to be a lot more than just this niche digital gold than we view it as right now. But that is the simplest way to explain it to someone who is brand new to this.
Yeah, that's right. That when I was thinking about these topics and putting this piece together, I realized that the bigger an innovation is, the more it touches. And then in order to describe it, you have to go to a higher level of abstraction in order to encompass everything that this thing touches. So like, I use the example of, when DVDs came out. This is a rather narrow innovation, right? It's a videotape, but better, right? Like that's how you describe it. It's easy to understand. But when the printing press comes out, like that's a big innovation. How do you fully encompass everything that touches? The only way to do that is to say like it makes printed words more abundant. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? That's
right.
So abstract.
Nobody's moving the needle on that one. Like, oh wow, printed words are getting more abundant. Who fucking cares? Yeah, but it changed the world. I mean, that was the Renaissance. I mean, if you could have told someone in the, what was it, like 1540 or something in the Gutenberg press that this was going to create in 100 years, a Renaissance period of time when like some of the most beautiful fucking sculptures in the world were ever, I mean, just the proliferation of information made everyone's life a multitude better.
Have you been paying attention the last few years? If so, you know one thing. Not your keys, not your coins. This is a quaint saying, but it's real. If you're not holding your seed keys, you have a Bitcoin IOU, not Bitcoin. CoinKite is the maker of the Cold Card Mark IV. This is the industry standard for holding the keys to your Bitcoin. Holding your keys should not be intimidating, and it isn't. The Mark IV makes this an incredibly simple process. You could be a degenerate firefighter and hold your own keys. That's how simple it is. If you want to create a more complex setup, the Cold Card Mark IV has you covered there as well. You can create a multi-sig using a cold card, a tap signer, and even the upcoming Q1. Speaking of the Q1, if you want to have every bell and whistle and give yourself no boundaries as far as interacting with Bitcoin is concerned, the Q1 is your signing device. CoinKite makes some of the most sought-after gear in Bitcoin. The block clock, seed plates, the open dime, and the Sats card. Everything you need to secure your Bitcoin. Use code BCB for 5% off the Mark IV.
And these things become even harder to digest the implications of when network effects are involved.
Right.
Right. You think about the internet. It's like, okay, people are putting information on these fucking computers. Who cares? Well, it starts to matter a lot more when Aunt Sue and then Grandma Sally and your mom and the guy you want to buy muffins from this afternoon are all using that same information portal.
Or much more importantly, your peers that you want to date start using that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. The wonderful seeds of the love that is now my wonderful marriage happened on AOL, and so the incentives align and everybody starts realizing, oh, other people are using this, I'm using it too. But until that starts happening, which I would argue we're starting to really get into the early innings of here, it's hard for people to understand the use case.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, like, in the way that we tried to encompass what the printing press was or what the internet is, if you're really trying to encompass what Bitcoin is, it's more abstract than digital gold, but it becomes like hard to wrap your head around. In my mind, it really is the digitization of value.
Yeah.
Like that's the scale of what we're talking about, but that's so abstract. It doesn't make sense. I think because we're deep down the rabbit hole. Yeah.
Andreas Antonopoulos' series, The Internet of Money, may still be the best way to introduce somebody to what a wide breadth of possibilities this is going to open up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and because we're in the rabbit hole, this makes sense to us. But like, if you say that to a friend at a party, they're like, what? Glaze over immediately and won't process it. But like, the reality is we're living through the digital revolution. We've gone through the digitization of information with the internet. We think that's everything, but that's not everything. You can't digitize value with the way that the internet is constructed. And that's what Bitcoin does. It makes it possible to digitize value. And we're living through the second half of the early stages of the second half of the digital revolution with the internet of value, Bitcoin. You know, Bitcoin is the protocol. It's the HTTP, the TCP/IP for value. And now we're in the, you know, it's like being in 1995 for the internet, but you can own a slice of it and it's Bitcoin, because this is the protocol that everyone will converge on as the way to store and transmit value in digital space. Like that's the scale of what we're actually talking about, but you're just not going to get anywhere if you lead with that with a stranger.
Right. I'm going to quote you here from this piece we're talking about. It's titled "How to Best Describe Bitcoin." You say, and the thing about digital versions of analog systems is that they can be much more perfect than their physical world counterparts. The internet versus a library, digital cameras versus film, email versus snail mail. And the takeaway, the warning in a sense that I would give people is that, especially when it comes to the storage and transmission of information, digital versions are just straight up superior. There's no other way around it. And money at its core is just about fidelity and transportability of information. And whatever has the best fidelity and transportability of value is going to win. And this is better than everything on the planet. And where I caution people is that it's extremely hard to even imagine ways in which this could be upgraded. I guess the caution, the caution is against the crypto narrative of the next best version is going to come out. And when you start to understand a little bit more about distributed systems and network effects and open source protocols, you start to realize that Bitcoin is it. But this is another touch point or handle for new people. I love it from your piece. Digital versions tend to be better. And it's just hard to argue that money's not going to go this way at some point, and to argue that it's not Bitcoin is becoming increasingly challenging in a sense.
Yep, completely. And the only way to really wrap your head around that side of it is to think about the physical world best store of value commodity asset, and that's gold. And how able is it to engage with commerce and the global economy in its native form, in its physical form? It's not. It sucks. It sits in a vault, and hopefully it's audited, but it never is. Yeah. So you're trusting that it's there. You're trusting some authority that it's there, and then that authority is issuing promissory notes against something that you hope is there. And then the promissory notes are like, they're one step removed from the actual thing that you want to own. And Bitcoin gets rid of all of that. Bitcoin makes it possible to lend Bitcoin overnight to someone in Budapest and get it back. Like, that's where this eventually heads. You can't do that with gold. You're just not doing that. And you can't do a lot of things with gold because you're not sending it in the mail. There's no security there. So it ends up sitting in a vault.
I wouldn't recommend sending it in the mail.
Yeah. The scale of what is possible for a Bitcoinized economy and financial system is incomprehensible to us still. Like it's like imagining the current state of the internet in 1993. Like you're just not going to imagine that you can FaceTime your mom from a little handheld device in 1993. Like you're fighting to set up an email address. Like that was hard.
Right.
And you were hoping to just send a few, text characters clunkily through through some modem, night and day in just 25 years, 30 years. And that's what we're looking at in terms of what's ahead for a Bitcoinized financial system. It's going to be. I don't
think it's going to take 25 years either. I think this is moving even faster. And it's like these technologies build on each other, right? We know these networks have been built. They're just kind of standing on the shoulders of giants through all these network effects, all the way to Bitcoin, and the internet just, helps it proliferate even faster. I want you, if you're willing to, chum the water a little bit about where you think the price of this thing goes in the next couple of years. And then we'll temper people with a little bit of like how to not FOMO in, at where you could be getting yourself in underwater quickly and then get washed out, which has happened to innumerable people in every 4 years. We see this happen.
Yeah, love that. All right. So before the ETFs, I've been expecting, just taking everything all the mathematical patterns of diminishing returns and sort of the cyclicality with the halving. As you guys know, I'm a massive adherent to the halving is the prime mover of everything here. It sets the tone for global adoption and monetization of Bitcoin. So it's all about the 4-year cycle for me. And the 4-year cycle will continue. I think there will come a time a year from now, maybe it's even 6 months from now, where people start to genuinely say and believe that this time is different. Like, we're not going to have a crash.
Yeah, they did that last time.
Totally.
Yeah. It'll happen. Yeah. There's always, whenever you hear that, you're like, okay, things are getting a little shaky.
Yeah, that's right. And that probably means it's like you're within 6 months of the top when you start hearing that narrative. So before the ETF, I was thinking my best guess analysis based on looking at past cycles was we're probably going like 120, maybe 160. Maybe we surprise ourselves and go to 200 in this bull market. The ETFs change that, and it's kind of mind-boggling to me how much they change it. I'm actually uncomfortable with like how much they could change things, and we'll get into that. So, the ETFs launch when you take out the GBTC sell-off at the very beginning of the ETFs launching. And really kind of in the last week a little bit too, because of Gemini Genesis bankruptcy issues. The average ETF demand per trading day has been like 9,000 Bitcoin per day, something around there. Maybe it's actually 7,000 or 6,000, something like 9,000 Bitcoin per day.
No big deal.
And no big deal. We're only mining 900 Bitcoin per day. So right there, just one demand source, just these ETFs, a demand source that didn't exist 4 months ago, is hoovering up 9 times the amount of supply that's created, or 10 times the amount of supply that's created. That's a massive supply demand imbalance right there. That doesn't account for people buying outside of the ETFs, sat stackers, asset managers who are buying the actual underlying coin. Not even accounting for that. So assume net zero demand inflow from anybody outside of ETFs. If the ETFs continue, 9,000 Bitcoin a day with the prices that we were at a couple weeks ago, was about $500 million a day. And that's a ton. Obviously we're about to have the halving in 3-4 weeks now. And we're going to drop from 900 Bitcoin mined per day to 450 Bitcoin mined per day. $500 million of inflows per day and 450 Bitcoin mined per day. Like, if that's it, if all else equal, like if there's no demand flow in and out from any other demand sources, $500 million a day and 450 Bitcoin mined per day, like if that is sustained, it finds equilibrium at $1 million per Bitcoin. That's the scale of what we're
talking
talking
Samson Mao numbers here.
Yeah, I don't think it gets there this cycle.
Ayo.
Because there are other things that happen where like there's going to be a lot of OGs sitting on a ton of coin who
they're going to start selling,
happy to sell well before $1 million. To secure $1 billion of wealth in diversify into real estate and who knows what. Go buy the Washington Post. Who knows what people will do? The OGs will do with their money.
Yeah. Buy Twitter maybe.
Yeah. So
make Elon their bitch. Yep.
That's what we're dealing with in terms of the current scale of ETF demand. It changes everything. The question is like, will it be sustained? What's weird is that there's actually, in my mind, a case to be made that it will increase because there's a lot of TradFi firms have to vet any new investment vehicle, and it takes several months before they get approval to include that in their portfolios. And then all other portfolios, like if you're running like a fund and you're going to reevaluate your allocation and you're going to consider including a few percent allocation to an ETF, that takes time. Like that will take more months than we've, the ETFs have been out for 2 months now. So that'll take a little bit more time. And then there's add into that the reflexivity of when number goes up.
Yep.
It's human psychology. Everybody wants to buy some. So, I think we're going to see the ETF inflows increase over the next 12 months as the halving starts to really do its thing in terms of the supply shortage and price having to go up in order to find supply to try to reestablish supply demand price equilibrium. And it's just going to have to keep going up and up and up because there's so much demand and not enough supply.
I've got this feeling, and this is totally anecdotal. There's nothing backing this, but I think a lot of people are going to think they were geniuses and sell it like 150 and watch this thing go up significantly from there. Because all the people that got burned the last ride, they're going to try to make sure they get off the table before, this thing hits the fan, which most people expect. And they'll probably be left behind, never to be able to buy it at that price again, potentially.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, I was writing before the ETFs came out about how there's a case to be made that this will be the first bull market that's bigger than the previous bull market in terms of amplitude. And that's because the China mining ban in 2021, the pivot from QE to QT, and then also the FTX fraud and paper Bitcoin that was happening as part of that. Those factors, I think, muted our bull market last cycle. And we should have gone higher. Maybe we should have gone to 150, maybe 110, who knows. But I think we should have gone higher. And we would have had it not been for those factors. Those factors are no longer in place. In fact, the QE to QT might, in fact, be switching QT to QE. So, we'll have some afterburners on global liquidity and money printing that sends Bitcoin higher for a number of reasons. But so, all that plus you add in the ETFs, and the ETFs are just frankly bigger than anything that we've seen. I mean, I love the halving. And the halving is when you have a 2x supply demand imbalance overnight.
Right.
Right now we have a 10x supply demand imbalance, and it's eating through available for sale supply. Right? Like there's only so much supply that people are looking to sell at around this price, or between here and 100,000. How many coins? I don't know. Is it 100,000? Is it 500,000 coins that are? Is it 2 million? Who knows? But every day they're gobbling up 9,000 coins, and that could just increase, or it could just continue too. And then it's only a matter of time until you eat through that available for sale supply. There's nothing left. The price has to go much higher. That's why we're seeing all-time highs now before the halving. The halving comes in 3-4 weeks and ratchets up that supply imbalance, 2x further. So you go from 10x supply imbalance right now to 20x, all else equal, in 3-4 weeks. we've never dealt with that. Like the halving has only ever caused a 2x supply imbalance. And we've seen what that causes over an 18-month accumulation of that supply shortage. It causes our parabolic advance, blow off top, crazy bull markets, where an incremental slice of the world realizes this is a good asset, I should get in on it, and the reflexivity of demand drives it to blow off top, and then we have a crazy crash on the backside. That's going to happen again. It's happening already. We're hitting all-time highs because we have this massive imbalance before the halving even arrives, and the halving's only going to accelerate and continue that. So we'll see how high we go. To tie it all back to the original question of, I'm now kind of expecting 250, but like that's from me raising my price from like a 150, and it's kind of hard for me to see it stopping at 250 like if the things that we've been talking about remain true. Like it should go way higher than 250, but I'm just kind of uncomfortable with saying like it's going to go to 300, 350, 400. Because
it's like the other thing is like the externalities we can't predict, black swans. Like we keep hearing these things about wealth tax, right? Like I can imagine a scenario where if Bitcoin goes to 500,000, there's a relatively small swath of people that just suddenly got very wealthy. And that's a very appetizing little nugget for the Elizabeth Warrens of the world. So if like there's an unrealized capital gains tax for Bitcoin of 40%, and you can sell before X date and get, I could see that killing it.
Right. Yeah. That would precipitate a top and then a crash. Like the other part that, you asked about, like, how to avoid the problems of, as we get deeper into a bull market. Like, I think it's important to keep in mind that the mechanics will remain the same of like, the halving will amplify our current supply imbalance, and that will play out. And that part of that will mean like excessive exuberance building in the market, people taking on riskier and riskier positions, things, leverage, things that they cannot.
We already see people talking about Thorchain and fucking using that to lever their Bitcoin. Like, Jesus Christ, did we learn nothing?
Here we go.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. And that'll happen for this whole new subset of Bitcoin investors, the boomers who are just getting exposure through ETFs. Like that psychology will happen to them as well. And people who are like counting on their retirement, counting on their nest egg, are going to find it irresistible to put in, I'll put in half of my nest egg because this thing only goes up. And those mistakes tend to happen about 12 months after the halving. Like that's when the psychology of it, we're so dumb. We're just such dumb creatures that we cannot remember more than 12 months earlier in terms of emotions. Like Bitcoin at that point will feel like it has only ever gone up. And so people will assume it will only ever go up again. And they'll make bad decisions and overextend themselves. And then when the tide starts to go out, those are the forced sellers who will, cause the crash to happen again. And we'll have, I think, another 70% crash plus. And it'll happen, I don't know, it'll start like 12 to 18 months after the halving, and we'll repeat it all again. Like, so don't, the mistake I made last cycle was encouraging people to buy Bitcoin 12 months post halving. I won't make that mistake this time.
Yeah, you don't want to willy woo yourself. You know what I mean? You got to be careful.
Dude, if you get willy wooed, you deserve it.
What to you guys is being willy wooed?
He had a newsletter. I think, embarrassingly enough, we subscribed to it for 3 months. And he was calling, when Bitcoin was at like 62,000, he was saying this thing's going to 150. And it was just total bull porn. You know what I mean? It was just a newsletter of bull porn.
Yep.
Speaking about just being a dumb ape, I can remember being just buying it hook, line, and sinker, being like, oh yeah, this on-chain stuff, this shit works. Like he's calling 220, dude. Like fuck. You know what I mean?
I fell for Willy Woo the prior cycle. He had a
dude,
wait. Can we actually figure out where we are in this bull run based on if Willy Woo has re-kick started his newsletter? Because like I'm looking out for that.
Pretended like nothing happened. It was the quiet confidence with which he went about it too. He'd be like, I'm looking at the numbers here. You hear like I'm crunching the numbers. I'm seeing 220 to 230 this cycle. You're like, fuck, wow, he's in a pretty narrow band. We're in good shape. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the confidence, the false precision. That's what I fell for 4 years earlier too. Back then, it was there was some on-chain indicator that had never been wrong. You know, like classic. And then of course it was wrong at the very. It was actually at the bottom in 2019, like January 2019. Willy Woo's on-chain indicators, he was certain that we were going lower. So I was on the sidelines and missed out on, suddenly we jumped from 3,200 to 9,000.
Don't get Willy wooed.
Yeah, it can happen on both ends of the spectrum. A couple comments to as we round out here. The first, that it's so simple, but it struck me, is we're talking about real evidence. Like there's 9,000 Bitcoin being soaked up a day.
Yep.
$500 million. These aren't predictions. They're not assumptions. No, that's what's happening on the market with current vehicles.
That's published data, which is different from how we normally interpret these things.
Totally. And that's a huge difference. And that's why throwing out the potential for these large numbers, maybe even is just a warning for someone that's thinking, I'm just going to wait on the sideline. Like, no, there's enough demand and not enough supply at this point, evidentially day to day, that the price could go crazy. And the other thing is, we just don't understand how few 21 million is.
Yeah.
I forget what the comparison is. We've talked about it on the show before, but like counting to a million takes a week and counting to a billion takes like 36 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
So when people hear the illions, they don't make any sense. I mean, 9,000 over 21 million is an unbelievably daily soak on the scarcest asset on the planet. So we're actually seeing this now. We're not talking about this. We're not predicting this. We're seeing the scarcity chokehold really get around the neck. And so these numbers are starting to sound more mathematically robust than they have in the past. And then the other thing I just wanted to throw in, Josh, you in the question deck, you talked about this power law model. And we don't have to get into all the specifics, but the thing that I appreciated the most about it is just the hypothetical numbers that this law is delivering. It's calling for like 210 as your high this cycle, followed by a dip all the way back down to 60. And I was like, man, that sounds really realistic. And that's something everybody should conceptualize, because that would be insane. Picture from this point going to 210,000, almost $250,000 of Bitcoin, and then coming back below where we are right now. This is the 70, 80%. Yeah. And this is the kind of stuff you want people to take their seat. But you also, I mean, I've already started giving once again, my 80% warnings. I want you to buy Bitcoin. I want you to picture the number you put in going down by 80%. Are you comfortable with that? Because
I think it's important to deliver that to people too, because if you're listening to this and you've not bought any Bitcoin, there is a possibility this thing doesn't do anything close to the numbers we just told you. There's a very not a very good one, but we might this 9,000 Bitcoin a day these ETFs are buying, that can disappear overnight. That's no guarantee of anything.
Right.
So
that's right. However, the halving is a guarantee.
Right.
That, because that is the one thing that is certain, is that there will be that supply imbalance coming up soon. But, yes, your point about ETF demand isn't certain, but we can make a
it's reasonable to say it's probably going to continue. Maybe not quite. Who knows? I mean, it could increase. It could decrease. It could it's not going to zero, I don't think.
Right.
The other thing to factor in is that 9K a day is our working number right now. So to suggest this is the most that ETFs are ever going to purchase per day, that's possible. I don't think most people have that in the likely category. You're here to tell me for the next 20 years, you think that 9,000 a day is the most we'll ever see. Okay, that's fair. You can take that position. I'm just saying that's the peg right now that we're working off of. And so that number could double. That number could triple. That number could quadruple. That number could go up by a factor of 10 at theoretically, no, with supply constraints. But just what that represents in terms of demand could go up exponentially. And so I go back to just really appreciating that point that you made, Jesse, of that's the working number right now. It's not made up, right? And the brick wall on the other side is going nowhere. It's the most immovable obstruction we've ever seen in finance. The supply side of Bitcoin is not going to budge, okay? Right. And I think people that don't understand Bitcoin and haven't done the research have not fully digested the implications of absolutely fixed immovable supply for the first time in human history.
Yeah, it's an immovable force meeting a movable object.
It is a boner unlike the financial world has ever seen, Josh. We're talking not 11 or 12, we're talking 15 inches girthy, rock solid.
Unusably large. That's what we're talking about.
Like, yeah, the carrier of that cock is imperiled. Like, it's so big that you can't ever penetrate that sort of burden.
Yeah, that is a burden to bear, I bet. And there's some unlucky individuals out there carrying that burden.
I think that's the way to describe Bitcoin. Yeah, but we'll go with that. No elephant, no digital gold.
We'll have to name this episode some derivative of that.
The largest cock the financial world has ever seen. And yeah, you can't take it completely. All you can do is caress it, behold it.
You can kind of work it in maybe, but you're not taking the full thing. You're not digesting this entire anaconda.
We're going to get an email about this segment. I wish you guys would just stay on topic and stop it with the vulgar humor. That's what that email is going to say.
That's why people are listening. We're Trojan horsing the quality content through the crude humor, huh?
Somebody sent us an email. I don't know. It was a few weeks ago. Some of these emails they're fucking good. And the person was like, basically the whole thing of, I appreciate the guests you guys bring on. I appreciate, sometimes what you guys say, but like the humor just gets obnoxious. And we're like, that's the only reason. There's 100 million Bitcoin podcasts right now. That's the only fucking reason people choose to turn on the show is to hear a couple degenerate firemen sling some vulgarity every once in a while. That's all we offer, folks.
We just have to bookend these episodes with some kind of dumb humor, and then that's our job done.
The nice thing is it comes naturally.
Yeah.
It comes,
Jesse, man, thanks for joining us. Anything you want to hand off before we bookend this thing?
Sure. Yeah. Well, you can find me on Twitter. It's Croesus _BTC, CROESUS _BTC. That's my old pseudonym that you guys know well. And you can also find if the multi-institution custody format was interesting to you, or you just want to learn about it to know about the latest in what's going on in Bitcoin companies. Check us out at onrampbitcoin.com. And yeah, if you want to learn more, you can click the button to schedule a chat, and we'll hop on the phone and answer any questions you have.
Jesse, you interested in starting a company called Rug Pull? We'll name it Rug Pull. We'll do some kind of custodial model
services.
Oh man, I got the giggles coming. Let's launch our own. We can cut that out if you want. I'm just joking. No. I actually don't want to leave that in because that's going to give people the wrong idea about Onramp. I don't want to do that.
It's hilarious.
It's fine. It's a fine joke because I'll take the opportunity to say that's not possible with Onramp's model because we can't rug pull. But I like the idea of setting up.
I just like being upfront with the idea that we're going to scam you and take your money.
I think you could go. You could probably make it pretty far with like a BlockFi model, maybe a Celsius model, and just call it what it is, like rug pull. You just don't know when. Like
we might just rug half of our customers, not the other half. You don't know what you just spin a wheel.
Yeah, we should make that our slogan, like our donation arm. Yeah. Our donation arm for this is just if you want to support a couple firefighters and their families, we just have a multi-sig you can deposit Bitcoin to. We call it rug pull.
We can spin a wheel and find out who's the lucky donor. They get the 10%. We just take the 1% off the top.
And the wheel is like 99%. You guys take it, and then 1% the customer gets their money back.
It's funny because it happens so much.
Yeah. Jesse, and we're going to see that again. Like
I know.
BlockFi, Celsius, we're going to have it dressed up in some new version. It'll also be interesting when Wall Street does it. Like Bitcoin is going to kill some big players on Wall Street because they're gonna play with yield, and they're gonna get screwed when the completely inflexible supply schedule of Bitcoin causes a crash, and the tide goes out, and they're caught swimming naked.
You're right.
That's going to happen to
that's
Wall
gonna be
Street
interesting,
titans.
dude. That could be the other black swan right there. That might be
that's
the one.
real black cock.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah, that's a meaty one too. You don't wanna get caught on the wrong side of the bed with that one.
If this show ever just disappears, folks, it got shut down by a chief officer.
Yeah.
That listened on the wrong week.
Or we started a company called Rug Pull.
Yeah. Jesse, thank you so much, man.
Thanks,
we always
Jesse.
love talking to you, man. Thank you.
Great being on the show. Look forward to next time.
Take care, man.
Take care.